So, I want to talk about your career and making rational decisions in your career. I think that this is really, really important, and it's something that we all kind of um, that I struggle with. Actually, if I say we all, it's probably more me that thinks about this. And I want to talk about what it means to sort of move up and to do things correctly. And I think sometimes we forget that a lot of life is not about doing things correctly. And a lot of life is just doing things without it being correct or right or wrong. And I think that's going to be very helpful for you with your own career. So if you don't know me, I am Professor Dave Massac. I'm an Associate Professor of Innovation Strategy and Entrepreneurship. And I created this whole reciprocity project to give back as much as I possibly can. There's so many people who help me out that I want to pay the favor forward to help you out. So I'm a little disheveled, which is part of the reason why I'm probably being a little bit more introspective right now at this moment. I had a hard couple of days of swimming. That swim practice was quite difficult. I was doing master swimming, and my coach is amazing, but she's very, very tough. So, anyways, I'm just chilling, and I wanted to talk about like doing rational decisions in your career, because I think we sort of get wrapped up into that. So, what does it mean to actually make rational decisions? Well, this is where you come up with some sort of criteria in what you want to do, and then you make alternatives in your mind of what this actually looks like. Sometimes you might put it on an Excel spreadsheet, and then you forecast the alternatives that you're going to get based on the criteria that you actually have, or forecast the outcomes you're going to get from these alternatives and select the best one. And we think that this is a pretty rational process. At least that's what that we're told with this, right? And we're sort of thinking about what it is to get to the best thing, to get to the next best thing, to improve, to always get better. And one thing that I've sort of studied in this area, I study this stuff a lot in terms of decision making and learning, is that there's often not really a rational choice that we have to make, and that is a problem in terms of understanding what we actually do in this world, right? So we often think in business schools in particular, we often think that careers are very rational and they're very linear, and we teach people to be very linear in terms of, you sort of set out these alternatives. We teach you how to do that, and then you go and do those alternatives, and you simply just execute on those alternatives. But the world is incredibly complicated, and there is often not a right answer. So first of all, the world is not linear, and that is the problem in terms of understanding this. It's a complex process, and we don't normally have an understanding of what are good alternatives and what those outcomes actually are. It's hard to sort of think about what those things are. And then the second thing is that the world often changes very quickly, and we don't have a good sense of what those things are. So most people actually don't do this rational decision-making process, and we default to kind of like what you do in terms of just kind of going through the motions. And it makes sense, right? Like if you think about it, most of us have probably gotten our career through a personal contact that you would never have guessed, or your job through a personal contact. The whole rational process of, applying to all these different jobs and then coming up with something that's good doesn't happen to a lot of people. Often just comes out of the blue. And you're like, oh, okay, I'll sort of look at this alternative. But to sort of think about this, it's far from a rational process, and it's far from this sort of calculative process of thinking where these outcomes are. And I think that the fundamental problem is not like how the world changes, and to know that the world is not necessarily a rational process. You actually just miss out on a lot of really interesting things, and you miss out on just being yourself if you're being sort of very calculative and rational. I tend to do this a lot. That's my default, is to think about, okay, if I do this, that's why I became an engineer, right? Like if I went and did this school and that thing, and that's the outcome I'm going to get, then everything is going to be perfect. But I have to remind myself that a lot of life, a lot of the stuff that we actually do is just for the heck of it. And there's just a lot of playfulness and a lot of fun that you can do. Um, for if you treat everything as a sort of rational process, you kind of extract the funness out of it, right? So, coming back to this, why I'm disheveled, is sort of swimming. It is swimming is very hard. It's very, very intense. It's probably one of the most intense sports that you could do cardiovascularly and as well in terms of muscle, in terms of moving your muscles, and can be very, very intense. And you can push it to the extreme if you're doing this where you just don't like it. And even though you're sort of passionate about it and you really enjoy it, you just are not going to like the process. But we have to sort of take a step back and remember why you're doing something and just enjoy it for what it is. If we can get to that moment where you're just enjoying things for what it is rather than huffing and puffing and being all hot and sweaty and bothered, sometimes you enjoy it a heck of a lot more. It's like this, right? Like what I'm doing here. One thing I could sort of see this as, part of me sees this as like, oh, I'm building the sort of business, the whole reciprocity project. But part of me is like, hey, it's just me kind of shooting, talking about things, just being open. Really not, I'm talking, my cell phone is literally on top of a box being held up by a mug, and if I sort of imagine it as that way, it becomes a lot less stressful. One thing, if I'm thinking of it as sort of calculative, rational process, I'm going to think that everybody's going to watch this. And I'm going to think that I'm not going to do it because I'm very embarrassed to do these kind of things and be open. And, the whole world's going to know about me. And they're going to think that I'm a fraud. And, they're going to think that I'm a disaster. And look at my hair, right? Like everything is just a mess. And they're going to make fun of me. But on the other side, if I just think of like, okay, this is what it is, right? I'm talking to an electronic device that's sitting on top of a box being held up by a mug. And, the sort of world that's out there, if it's on the internet, who cares? If it's on the internet, it doesn't mean that many people are actually going to watch this. And the people that are going to watch it, they're going to see it once and they're not going to care about it. And that's literally what it is. Most people watch these things once and then they never care about it. And it's some rando person in the middle of nowhere. So, the whole thing is, it's not as serious as you think it is what I'm getting at. And sort of treat it as more of a playful thing instead of this sort of rational process thing of you do all these kind of things to get to the right endpoint. Just treat it like you're enjoying it, acting all goofy and silly, and try not to take yourself so seriously with it. There's a lot of things you're going to end up in the very often, if you're goal directed, you're going to end up in the same spot anyways, regardless of whether you take it very seriously and your whole world is all wrapped up into it, or you just kind of do it anyways and enjoy it. And you're not going to be that much far behind. So with that, hopefully you get a little bit from this. Rationality is not always the best thing. Remember to have a little bit of play. Remember to not take yourself seriously. It really does not matter in the end what's going on. So just enjoy it and have a good one. Oh, and if you don't believe me, I'm going to show you the box in the mug right now. So here it is. There's my box and there's the mug. All right. Take care and have a good one.